Hey, Bears Girl, what's your favorite jingle of all time?
Well, although I've got to say, it's the Kit Kat one.
Give me a break, give me a break, break me off a piece of that Kit Kat bar. Oh yes, I'm loving it. Memorable, catchy, and instantly connects with the brand.
You know who else is looking for a memorable jingle? TickSplits.com, and they're willing to give away a free ticket to the Chicago Bears Green Bay Packers game for a good one.
I knew that. A ticket to the game, and we'll set up a meet and greet with the winner and members of the barroom and other barflies. It will be fun. Bears Go, give our listeners some of the particulars while I try to come up with some TickSplits sample jingles. Like, for instance, how about this one? Like a good ticket broker, TickSplits is there.
These, although, no, that's not a good one. No. Okay, here's what you need to do, Bears fans and barflies. Step 1. Record an amazing, catchy 10 to 30 second jingle for TickSplits to use on their social media promos. It can be audio only or a video entry. Step 2. Submit it via Twitter and make sure you tag both at Bears Barroom and at TickSplits. Step 3. Send a copy via email to marketing@ticksplits.com. That's marketing@TIXBLITZ.com with Bears Barroom in the subject line. Contest runs from November 19th until December 5th, and the winner will be announced on December 10th. Full contest details are available on bearsbarroom.com.
All right, you gave me an idea for another one. TIXBLITZ.
No.
Nothing like that?
No.
How about this one? You deserve some tickets today, so get up and call TickSplits.
No, please make sure that you're not using any trademarks or copyright infringements. Be creative, and as Matt Nagy says, be you. So head over to Bears Barroom for all the details. Submit as often as you want. Just please make them better than Aldo's.
Hey, what's going on, Bears fans? It's Cars here again. This week, we're going to do a review of the Bears game. As you know, every Tuesday I tend to drop an article, which I do weekly observations, where I talk a lot about the Bears, talk about the NFC North, and then talk about the greater NFL as a whole. Instead of that, now we're going to couple that article, which will maintain its focus with more on the NFC North and around the NFL. But instead of writing about the Bears, I'm going to go ahead and talk about the Bears. Then on Thursdays, I continue to do a Cars Keys or 3 observations of things that I'm going to be looking out for in the upcoming game against our opponent. This week happens to be the Detroit Lions. Being that this is such a condensed week, I don't really see that there's a whole lot of need here to do two like that. So I'm going to condense this down a bit and do one giant podcast. And then next week we'll get kind of back to a more regular cadence. So that way you only have to hear me once. And you don't have to listen to stats at more and more and more. So, with that, let's get started and review about the Minnesota Vikings. This game was as much of a must-win as you can possibly have for a team that's really exceeding a lot of expectations. All season, right, we've heard we haven't beaten anybody. We've had some tough matchups, right? We were pretty much a player or two away here from being 10-0. I think some people can argue we were a player or two away from potentially being, 5-4 or even worse. But this has been a season that has far exceeded my expectations. I mean, that defense, right? I always knew that Khalil Mack was good, and I, as a football fan, used to watch those games, but there's something about coming here that's made him take his game to a whole nother level, which is scary for a lot of people.
Cousins under pressure, and that's going to be picked off at the 9-yard line.
But that defense put on a performance against a very good Minnesota offense. One of the things I talked about in that Cars Keys is this is a team that puts up a lot of yardage. Now, they do it in a lot of small plays, which, again, we saw why they have to limit the exposure of that offensive line. They've got to do a lot of quick passing games and hope to get the ball into the hands of Thielen and Diggs sooner, and they can and hopefully get them in space so that they can make some plays. And we saw one play where that really happened, where Diggs shook off a really bad Roquan Smith tackle and was able to get free for 25 yards.
4-man rush. Cousins under pressure, and that's caught. It's caught by Diggs, and he's got some blocking inside the 40, all the way down to the 31-yard line. Biggest play of the night.
But other than that, these guys were really held in check. there was no run game. This team is already one-dimensional just simply because of that line. And we were able to just beat up on Kirk Cousins, right? Until those last two drives where I really call them garbage time because the defense basically went into a horrible, horrible Greg Blosh-like prevent defense. But up to that point, I mean, Kirk Cousins was 16 for 29 for about $126, right? I mean, they just dominated that game. But I really went into this as looking at this as the Mitch game. You know, from a national perspective, we're all getting tired of hearing the Mitch disses from the Lombardis to, what Wilbon used to say to all these different folks who have taken these pot shots at him along the way.
Jared Goff had the highest quarterback rating ever. So many people in the NFL are calling him a system quarterback. No. You put Trubisky in that Rams offense, you're not getting that.
And this is a game that I looked at as like, this could potentially put him on the map, right? This game's for first place. It's against a really good defense. And this would go a long ways to putting him on the map. And that first half was amazing. I mean, there could have been a lot more done, but again, this is a really good Vikings defense, and they went up and had 202 yards at the half. And Mitch had one pretty bad throw, right? That throw into to Gabriel, and I've heard Mitch talk, I've heard Nagy talk where they tried to take it away. He really didn't look off a safety. He had predetermined at the snap that he was going to go to Gabriel. That's been a play that he tries to throw every week, and Minnesota was really kind of sitting on it. But he still looked pretty good.
Trubisky rolling that way, keeps his eyes downfield, throws a little low, and it is Anthony Miller in the end zone for the touchdown.
There we go.
And then the second half came along, and then we put up only 100 yards. And so this ties back to something that I've been kind of concerned is too strong of a word again, because coming into this season, there weren't that many expectations for this team. And all I wanted to do was see growth. And we're playing from the lead a lot more than I expected, right? Like the amount of times that we've come into games in the lead at halftime is astounding. But when that second half comes along, it feels like the wheels come off. And I always have to remind myself, that Matt Nagy was an offensive coordinator for 4 regular season games and a playoff game as Kansas City. He didn't call plays outside of that. Now he had a plan and was part of the game plan every week, but he wasn't the guy on the sideline making those calls. We all know about Mitch's history and how far he's had to come. And please don't get me wrong. When I talk about these numbers and some of them, and I may harp out a little bit on negativity on some of these numbers, but the thing I have to keep grounding myself, and I think a lot of us have to keep grounding ourselves, is that Mitch had the longest way to come of the quarterbacks in his draft class. I think Watson was as polished as he's going to get, and I haven't really seen a whole lot of change in his game. And while Mahomes has just exploded, he did have more experience at the college level, and he's got an arm that's unlike a lot of folks in the NFL. Mitch, with his limited experience, he always had the longest room to grow. I think you could have argued coming into that draft who had the higher ceiling, Mahomes or Mitch. And I think to some degree we're seeing that probably Mahomes has a bit of a higher ceiling, but that doesn't mean that we can't win with him. So I say all that and kind of go on that little bit of a winded tangent there, because these two guys together are growing. They're figuring out what their strengths are. They're figuring out the offense, right? This isn't really a Kansas City offense. This isn't what we saw in Philly. This is a Matt Nagy version of what an offense can be. And that comes with Mark Helfrich, right? So what Helfrich is interjecting, some of the concepts and plays there. He's a guy that's learning the pro game as it goes while he's learning Matt Nagy's offense. I still believe that this offense would be in a much better place if Brad Childress were still on the coaching staff. His experience as a head coach, as a play caller, I think would go a long ways to win as Phil likes to say, he gets too cute in certain play calls or in certain quarters, to have that experienced man sitting over his shoulder, kind of pulling him aside and like, hey, you're doing X, Y, Z. You got to flip it up. Let's give this a shot. Because this is Matt's offense, there is nobody on that team right now that can really challenge him during a game. Now that's going to be something that's going to come, right? When Matt was saying that Mitch is about 2 years away from where he really wants him to be, let's be real, this offense is still 2 years away from that. Now, the positive in all of this is look at all the good things that we're doing while we're trying to figure it out, while we have pieces that just don't fit. I'm looking at you, Jordan Howard, but there's growth. So what I wanted to look at is we really don't seem to do well playing from the lead. And so being the nerd that I am, what I did is I took Mitch's numbers and I looked through every game. And so every game I went out and charted every pass, every completion, and the yardage associated with it. And then I built out some columns to talk through what his touchdown and yardage numbers were in each of the quarters. I wanted to talk about his completion percentage in all of those, and I want to talk about yards per attempt. I'm not going to talk about QB ratings. That's one of the dumbest and most useless stats in all of the NFL. It doesn't mean anything. When you can have a game like Kirk Cousins and get garbage time points and yardage and inflate your numbers in an effort where you've looked like hot garbage, it's a system that doesn't work, and that's to me where numbers fail. But what we find is that if you just take a look at a yardage perspective, the quarters are relatively even. Mitch has thrown for 643 yards in the first quarter. He's thrown for 698 in the second. He's thrown for 603 in the third, and he's thrown for 520 in the fourth. Now, it should come as a surprise to none of us that the fourth quarter is by far the lowest output, and so much of that has to do with the leads and conservative play calls and Matt Nagy trying to establish an identity and figure out, what are the play calls we can go to and how to keep manufacturing yards while playing somewhat conservatively. But those numbers look what I thought. But then there was another kind of epiphany to that. So let's look at Q2, right? 698 yards. It's a really good second quarter, right? That's looking at roughly 70 yards for the second quarter every game. But Tampa Bay really skews that number. Tampa, he threw for 209 yards in that second quarter. That is absolutely incredible, right? But when you take that away, that leaves Mitch with just under 500 yards passing in the Q2. In Q4, right, he's got 520, but what do we know about two key games? New England and Miami were two games where A, we didn't have the lead, or we didn't consistently have the lead. We had to keep pushing, we had to keep throwing, you had to keep moving. 298 of his 520 yards came against Miami and New England. That leaves under 220 yards for the remaining games. That is an awful number. If you take that out, Mitch is averaging about 28 yards per game in the fourth quarter. Now I get it, right? We've got leads. We've got sometimes comfortable leads, but remember, this is when we fell apart and lost that Packers game, right? This is when we started to let the Seahawks back into the game, right? This is when we really struggled to put away a very bad Arizona team. It carries on, right? The Jets, that game was closer than it should be. In the Bills game, right? And again, I know we had such a lead, but we had 2 yards passing in the fourth quarter. We couldn't move the ball at all, not in run or in pass. That Lions game, he had 24 yards. Now, the Lions started to come back into this game, and so the Bears tried to jumpstart the offense. We just couldn't do it. So, if you look beyond those numbers, what do you see? By far, Q1 is his best quarter. And what do we know about Q1? those are scripted plays, right? Average NFL coordinator will script somewhere around 20, 25 plays. Mitch knows what he's going into. He sees these things. He's been very upfront and honest with all of us that the more he practices the play, the more comfortable he gets in his progressions, in his reads, and it shows. In Q1, Mitch is completing 74.3% of his passes. He's got an average yard per attempt of 9.2. Right? He's thrown 5 touchdowns and 0 interceptions in the first quarter. What do we know about Q3, right? So Q3, we go in a locker room, you're making adjustments. You're going to script some plays. And you're going to go back to some of what worked earlier on. So these, again, are going to be plays that Mitch is much more comfortable with. 66% completion percentage. Now, it's a much lower yards per attempt. He's at 6.8. Q3 is his actually worst quarter for yards per attempt. But, right, he's still delivering 66%. 6 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. So let's take the outliers of the second and fourth quarter out now. In both of those, he completes 60.9%. Right, so a 5% drop from what you're looking at in Q3, a 14 almost % drop from what you see in Q1. He's thrown 5 touchdowns and 4 interceptions in Q2, which is by far his worst quarter statistically. In Q4, he's thrown 4 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, but he's averaging, again, if you take out the New England and Miami game, he's averaging 28 yards in the fourth quarter. In games that became too close, again, because of our conservative defensive play calling, but also because of just poor execution. The book on Mitch right now is, right, when you get him outside of his scripts, he's not as good. You can rattle him. The game clock is still moving too fast for him outside of those scripted plays. He still doesn't know who to go to, and here's a spoiler alert. He ignores Trey Burton far too often, and I think Matt Nagy does as well. They really need to do a better job of getting him more involved. Right now, Mitch, at least in that last game, tried to lock on to Allen Robinson a lot, which is his number 1 receiver, but he was throwing things that weren't there, hoping that Allen would save him. And we've got to get away from them. Mitch really needs to see a simplified game plan. We really need to focus a lot more, and I say we, but I'm talking us as the Bears organization as a whole. They really need to spend a lot more time in simplifying the game plan, making sure that what Mitch does well, what he's truly comfortable in, the reads that he's seeing are there. And if that's 50 plays, that's 50 plays, right? We're always going to have offshoots, but there should be 25 to 30 plays right now that the Bears are comfortable with in any situation. And because of the interchangeable parts, right, of they can move Gabriel, Miller, and Robinson kind of around and switch positions, they can run the same plays with different players in different positions and still expect the same outcome. Now, this isn't all doom and gloom. You know, the player that Mitch is most commonly compared to is Jared Goff. And when you look at Jared Goff's numbers last year, you saw a lot of those similar things. He was, like Mitch, really good in the first quarter, 65% completion percentage, really good in the third quarter, 66% completion percentage. Third quarter, he was 59. Fourth quarter, he was 57. Right? Third quarter was the better for touchdowns with Jared at 11, but fourth quarter was a problem. He had 3 and 3. He couldn't deliver. So these were 2 guys, again, that we get compared to a lot. And what do we see? We see the same dips in performance from an overall numbers standpoint when you get outside of the scripted stuff, the Q1, the Q3. So if that trend continues, right, that should tell us that the sky should continue to be the limit for Mitch. I still believe that, he's got a long way to go, but he's showing us enough right now to give us hope for that future, that he is really going to be the quarterback that we've all been dying for. And last tidbit on that, Chris Collinsworth did a great job of calling something out. And it's the part that gives me the most excitement, is watching the way that Mitch controls the line of scrimmage, controls the play calling, watching his eyes, watching how he's reading, watching how he's using a hard count to try to either get the defenses to identify themselves when we aren't using motion, when he's calling out protections, shifting protections, all of these things that were so new to him that he's already doing gives me a lot of hope that he'll continue for growth. So with that, we're going to switch over to my car's keys for the game. An old familiar foe, all of, 10 days ago that we faced, the Detroit Lions. We talked a lot about just how bad the Lions are, and they came back and won a game against the Carolina Panthers that they really shouldn't. I'd love to asterisk the crap out of that one because Graham Gano missed 2 field goals that he normally doesn't miss. Cam Newton missed an easy 2-point conversion at the end. The guy was so wide open. Mike Glennon could have hit him. But they still managed to win. This is a Detroit team that's coming in severely banged up, especially on the offensive side. We're not going to see Kerryon Johnson. We're not going to see Marvin Jones, right? This is going to be the Galladay show. What I want to talk, though, about is my key thing is Jim Bob Cooter had done a better job of trying to inject some balance into the offense. The line is, again, a hot garbage offensive line, but he'd done well in using his young rookie running back to really balance out the offense. But when the Golden Tate trade happened, I thought that was a terrible move for a team that still had some outside playoff hopes. And when you look back, the key for me has been Matt Stafford, who's an expert level of stat patter. Again, look at our game against him and even the Minnesota game where he got numbers late when they were meaningless. But Matt relied on Golden Tate to make things happen. When the offense would stall, they'd find a way to get him the ball. He would he would take something out of nothing. He was one of the hardest, if not the hardest wide receiver to tackle. And so for Matt, a guy who's averaging 7.5 yards per attempt, that's gone way out the window since Golden Tate's been gone. He's now averaging around 6 yards per attempt in the last 3 games without Golden Tate. That is a 5.5 against the Vikings. That is a 6.5 against us. Asterisk that a little bit with our Greg Blosh defense, and 5.95 against the Carolina Panthers. That passing game isn't working, and it's impacting him even more so in the long game. He is, over the last 3 games, 14 for 30 on any throw over 10 yards. I mean, that's as pedestrian as it gets. And that's even being inflated with some incredible catches that Kenny Galladay made, and I'll get to him here in a second. But key number 1 is we're going to keep him short. Much like you saw what we did with Minnesota, we're going to play really aggressively up front. This team is going to be one-dimensional. LeGarrette Blount doesn't have any speed or acceleration left whatsoever. Without Jones, all they have from an offensive standpoint is Galladay, and so they're gonna move to a quick passing game to protect that offensive line. That's a lot of what they did against Carolina, who also doesn't have much of a pass rush. But key number 1 is making sure that they stay short. We've got to continue to play aggressive in that short passing game. I'm glad for the experience with that, because we'll see that again in Minnesota and in Green Bay at the end of the year. So it's good for the exposure, but that's number 1. Number 2 is really Kenny Galladay. As an incredible player as he's been, he hasn't gotten enough national attention. And we saw that right against Carolina. He made 2 incredible plays. He finished at 8 and with 114 and a single touchdown. I mean, he is by far their most dominant player. You're not going to shadow him. Ideally, I think I would like to shadow him with one cover guy, but I think that Vic is comfortable enough with both Prince and Kyle that they're going to let them, follow wherever he goes, so that it doesn't matter which one is on him. But he is definitely a size mismatch. Right? He's another 6'4" guy who can go up and get it. You're gonna just have to keep some deep help over the side that he's at, and you've got to watch him. He's their only threat right now this game. And again, I think he's really limited when it comes to that because he's got Matt Stafford thrown to him. Last but not least, my third key to the game is going to be the offense. This is going to be another game where I think we're going to be able to get out to a lead early, right? We're going to be really effective. This is a team that can pass rush a little bit, but they don't really run defense very well. Slay is coming back, but he's still a little bit injured. Ashawn is injured. There's a couple other guys right now that are still kind of nicked up, and we need to take advantage of that. But this would be a week that the key for me is develop that killer instinct. Matt talks about it in his play calling. I completely disagree that he is trying to kill, teams. He is taking his foot off the pedal a bit and then trying to apply it later on, and it just doesn't work. So what I'd really like to see is as this team gets up, I want to see them keep going at it. I don't want them to ever take that foot off until we're up 40 points. So they've got to stay aggressive. And that leads me into that kind of 3B category is please, let's leverage Trey Burton. I harbor no belief, right, that Trey is at the same level of a Travis Kelce or a Zach Ertz or anything like that. But he is a very good tight end. I don't believe that there's anybody on the Detroit Lions outside of Slay that can really cover him. And I think he needs to be seeing a lot more passes. If we can use him in sort of that intermediate role, that's going to open things on the outside for Anthony Miller and Allen Robinson and Taylor Gabriel. And I think he's got to become that go-to guy that when we need a play, he's our best mismatch piece right now. That's where we've got to go. So that's it this week. Let's hope for another Bear victory. Let's go 8-3. Let's win 3 games in a division for the first time since 2012. And let's go get this W. Talk to you guys next week. Thanks.